Yay! What is
Yay!
up, everybody? Happy Monday. Ginger Runner Live begins now. We are on episode number 178, and tonight is a special episode. Very, very special episode. We have a wonderful guest on tonight's show. I'm excited to have him back. He's actually been on the show before, but I'm excited to have him back on because we're going to talk to him all about this weekend's big event and actually what it takes to be a race director. We'll talk about why this is important right now because I feel like there are a lot of races that have had to really lean on their race directors to pull some strings and make things happen in a very short amount of time because there's like wildfires and all these crazy things happening, especially here on the West Coast. So we're going to talk to our guest tonight, Rich White, the race director of the Cascade Crest Classic 100. It's exciting to have him back on the show, so this will be fun. And also, we're going to recap Kim's experience at the Cascade Crest 100. We've had a couple days to process, and we're going to do our best to kind of talk about what went down and maybe what we can learn from it and take away from that. So welcome, everyone, to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 178. We're excited for tonight's show. Sit back, relax. Here we go. Ginger Runner. Yay! What is up, everybody? Thank you for taking the time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit of it with us tonight. In that preview here before the show, I mentioned who our guest is and why it's important to have him on tonight, because I feel like having a race director on this show is great, not only to help those of us who run these events understand really what goes into making these events happen. I'm not going to say it's an underappreciated job, because I feel like many runners thank the race directors, obviously, but the race directors, their crew, the volunteers at these huge events, whether it's a 100-miler, a marathon, even the local 5Ks, a lot of work goes into making these events happen and to make sure that they go off without a hitch. Very recent, this last weekend, a big event went down that my lovely wife Kim participated in, the Cascade Crest 100, which is my first 100 that I did in 2015. I have the picture right behind me there is of mile 99.9.
You look great.
I don't.
You look fresh.
I do not. But that was one of the most memorable and wonderful experiences of my life. Also, it still haunts me to this day because it was certainly a traumatic experience out there in the storms. But our guest tonight is the race director of the Cascade Crest Classic 100, Mr. Rich White. So without further ado, let's introduce him. Yay! Wait, got to over. There we go. Yay! There he is. First of all, thank you for being on the show. I imagine right now all you want to do is sleep. Is that true?
Yeah, that's pretty accurate. But I am looking forward to hanging out with you. So thank you for the invite.
Of course. So just to set the stage, Rich White is an awesome guy. He's a fantastic friend. But
he's our favorite race director, but don't tell Gary Robbins.
Don't tell Gary Robbins that. Rich has a much better beard, too, which he has no beard. But Rich is also a firefighter, and I think that also relates well to what happened with Cascade Crest this last week. So I definitely want to talk a little bit about that, but of course, setting the stage, Rich has been working all weekend and all last week, and I imagine, like I said, all he wants to do right now is sleep. So please be aware that Rich is like unslept and most likely very tired, and his voice is gone, probably not only because as a race director you talk a lot, but the smoke out there, so many factors. So Rich, it's just awesome to have you on the show, awake and ready to talk to us. So thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
So let's talk a little bit about the event this year and what kind of separates it from all years previous. It seems like the last week a lot went down with Cascade Crest leading up to the event itself.
Yeah, so the big change this year was obviously the course change, where our course is one big loop. Other than the out and back up Thorpe most years, it's just one big solid loop, which is awesome and unique in the course, which we enjoy. But had some issues with, well, one particular wildfire that it's relatively close, but not to the course itself. Our issue became, I had an eye on it the last few weeks, but it was deep enough into that certain area. I didn't think it would be any issue. And the fire isn't on the course, but the fire ended up closing off access based on safety concerns and evacuation issues. The Clallam Lake Road closed, and I got some warning last week, actually Wednesday morning, that they were considering closing the road. It wasn't for sure, but that got me scrambling and figuring out a plan B, which was in the back of my mind, sort of, from a few years ago with the fire on the backside of the course. So based on the factors, realizing that that was really our only option to have an event, was to turn it into an out and back at Hyack, and which is our roughly halfway point. So ended up being 102 miles and out and back, mostly PCT, about 60 miles of PCT, and it's about, I guess, yeah, about that, and about the trail up to there from Easton up to the PCT is pretty rough, but mostly trail. So it was definitely a harder course. Hopefully I'm not jumping ahead.
Yeah, no, I was definitely going to mention that as well. Just for those who maybe are frequent viewers or listeners of Ginger Runner Live, you might remember the episode where I recap my experience at Cascade Crest. I talked a lot of specifics about that course, and Kim will be able to talk a little bit about that later. It's one of the most challenging hundreds in the U.S. I know it's definitely tough. It's built to be tough. It does feature some of the most scenic trails out there, PCT, up along No Name Ridge to Thorpe Mountain, and there's just some incredible, unique places that this course features. And unfortunately, because of the fires, Rich had to make the call. When did you end up actually having to make the call to turn the course from a full loop into an out and back along the PCT?
So Wednesday morning was the phone call from the Forest Service, giving me the warning that it was a possibility. But at that point, was told that it was probably, I think the message I got, I related to my core group that we're probably, I would say, somewhere like 30 to 40% chance. But then as we started working through plan B, just over conversation, I realized that we'd have to make the shift anyways, just because to roll the dice, hoping that they wouldn't have to close the road, like the fire wouldn't creep to that certain action point, was too big a risk, because yeah, we might have been able to pull off the event, but the chances or the risk of the fire progressing to a point and having to scramble or switch to plan B midstream would have just been an absolute disaster. So I realized that I was going to have to make that decision, but luckily Wednesday night I got a phone call from our contact at the Forest Service giving us the advance notice that the road was going to be closed. So at that point, luckily, the decision was out of my hands. The Forest Service, gave me a little advance scoop, and so at that point, Plan B was on. I didn't really. I think first thing Thursday morning is when runners and everybody else got the notice, but by Wednesday night we knew it was on, or Plan B was, and started making preparations accordingly.
I think one thing I want to point out is, as a race director, I can imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rich, but this is probably one of the most difficult decisions you have to make, is whether to alter the course. Logistically, that brings on its own challenges, or to cancel an event altogether. And I want to point out that Rich was not the only race director, and is currently not the only race director to have to deal with these things currently. We even got to talk with Hal. Well, I did. You were running. I got to talk with Hal Corner, whose wife was running and finished Cascade Crest this weekend. But he was talking about their challenges of Pine to Palm. I know Jameel Curry, another guest of the show, on the past, is dealing with some of that at Mogi on 100. So it just seems to be this trend that's happening right now, specifically because there's some terrible wildfires out there.
Even things like the Red Bull 400 in
Red Bull 400 up
Whistler
in Vancouver or BC.
Yeah.
So when you are presented with this, I guess there's no option. When the Forest Service contacts you and says, okay, you need to adjust the course, do the thoughts go through your head of like, should we cancel the event, or is it all plan B, let's make this happen, with any sort of plan C, or how do you make it happen so efficiently? Because I feel like it happened quick, but there was no question it was going to be okay.
Based on the factors, I mean, every situation is different. Luckily for us, I talked to Hal as well on Saturday morning, and I feel for his situation I think his is way worse than ours, because we're right in it, so we know what factors we're dealing with. He's still a few weeks out, so
Right.
it's really hard to plan because you don't know how things are going to progress or change by race day. So I really feel for his situation. Um, the issue for us was more access. So I didn't feel that cancellation was even on the table or really needed, because we are going to be south of the freeway. You know, the
Right.
fire wasn't the issue. It was just a matter of getting back to those aid stations. Um, and so luckily wasn't considering canceling. It's something you don't want to have to deal with, but you know, safety of runners, crew, everybody else is paramount. So as hard as this decision would be, you know, you take comfort in it. It's a sport that we love. It's an event that we love, but it is a sport, and it's not worth either our safety or getting in the way, just complicating things for the Forest Service or our hosts here. You know, we work right out of the Easton Fire Station. So again, with just having clear priorities, it makes those decisions a lot easier to deal with.
I made a post on Friday. We're going to get to the chat room. I want to remind
Yeah, I was
everyone.
gonna say there's lots of live questions in the chat room.
Yep.
So if you guys have questions for Rich, just make sure you're asking them. I am pulling the questions.
Yeah,
Sure.
and actually Brian Sands, who's basically his top tier Patreon support, who helps make this show happen every single week, especially in August, is also in the chat room. Brian, big shout out to you. Thank you very much for tonight's episode. Didn't forget. Was going to get to that here in just a second. But if you have questions, make sure you jump on into that chat room so Kim can pull them aside. What I was going to say is I posted something, it was either Thursday or Friday last week. It was something that I noticed was happening, was the community that surrounds Cascade Crest, which is a lot of people who've been running it for years, 10 plus years, or people who have been associated with the race, or people who are running just this year. Maybe this is their first 100 or first time at Cascade, but the community was right on board. I thought it was the coolest thing to see Rich post. There's a great Facebook group. It's the Cascade Crest 100 Facebook group. But Rich posts, hey, we might have to go to a plan B. And the entire community is like, awesome. Can't wait. Whatever you need, you know, we're there to help or assist. And the volunteers and everyone who helps make this race happen, flexible and just made it go off without a hitch. I can't imagine logistically what went on behind the scenes, but Rich, was there a mad rush? Was everyone just like immediately accepting of the new changes? Like what happened behind the scenes when something like this goes down?
So first I want to add on to, I think I forgot to answer earlier, and to tie into what you're saying now, the response from the volunteers and from the runners was just awesome. I think they understand that we do the best we can. It's about putting on a good event, and the chance of cancellation is there. Unfortunately, it wasn't for us. But they don't know that necessarily, but it's an option. Things happen that are outside of our control. So
yeah,
the positive response was really encouraging, because to know what sort of effort goes in to these things, it was really, really nice to get all the positive response. Awesome. You guys are still going to be able to put on an event. Just being really, really positive about that. And even getting approached by race directors and at the event saying, man, I don't know how you guys pulled it off on such short notice. Because it was about, 48 to 60 hours out that, we just switched gears. Luckily, the major flexibility, obviously the runners, mentally, they've been preparing for a certain course and splits and everything for, aid stage, drop bags packed and goals and everything, and then a course change. But really our volunteers, the aid station captains, they've been at their spots for years. We got aid station captains that have been running their spot for as long as the race has been going on. And to see the communication between them, what we essentially did was folded over all the aid stations from the back half or back side of the course, folded them over onto the front so that they were relieving the front crew, because the front half of the aid course, those aid stations weren't planning on being there for 15 to 20 plus hours. They're used to a 3 to 10 hour shift, so they had to tie in. We had two-way traffic where they're not used to it. Sorry if I digress, but it was just super awesome to see the communication and the excitement about just, we'll make it happen. It's going to work. And to see all the volunteers and aid station folk really just be, whatever we need to do, you got it. It's going to happen. Because from our side, it was a little, it wasn't a huge challenge because the decision was made outside of above me.
Right.
But all of the aid station supplies, it really simplified. The same aid station crews from the back half picked up their stuff and they just went to a different location. It was them having to sort of adjust to that. I've got some lighthearted, but feedback of we're not going back up to that spot because they're whether it was road access or just the flexibility was awesome, and their willingness to just make it happen. I can't say enough about the volunteers that we have. I know every race director or every event, they've got awesome volunteers. Volunteers is what makes this sport happen.
Right.
But I'm not going to say that we have the best, but we do have the best. Everybody has the best. Volunteers are just amazing. This sport just doesn't happen without it. And for those that don't, get out there enough and just work an aid station, please do. It's really critical to just keeping this sport alive. Not alive, but just keep it going, give it back. So
it's testament to what I also love is just kind of how you always talked about it, how old school the race is, and you don't necessarily have a lot of rules. You mentioned this kind of in the pre-race briefing that there's not a lot of rules. It's just more common sense, and there's that old school vibe of just don't be an idiot out there, and I love that. And the volunteers and the people who do man these aid stations they're fantastic people. As someone who has been able to see it from all sides, as a runner, as a spectator, as a volunteer, and as well as a crew and pacer, it's no brainer that you guys certainly have top tier everything. It's awesome. I want to start talking about the race. So talking about some of the logistics and stuff that Rich had to go through, it's bonkers. So I thank Rich for that. But there are questions for Rich regarding the race, which I really want to get to, because this is a unique opportunity to talk to a race director of one of the most difficult hundreds. It's a Hard Rock qualifier, Western States qualifier, all of those things. This is a pretty good opportunity. So as I mentioned, we do have a live chat room. And of course, if you have questions for Rich or Kim or any of us about Cascade Crest or the experience, drop into the chat room, let us know. Kim, what do we got?
Tons of questions already. Amber in the chat room asks, Rich, have you ever had to cancel a race due to wildfires?
No.
And
luckily not.
That's good.
Yeah.
There was a scare a couple years ago. What I mentioned, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, there was a trail closure up along the Needles. So it got me toying with plan B, plan C because of closure. But that was a lot smaller fire. And luckily, my explorations during those plan B, plan C thoughts sort of birthed the Needles 50K, which is a fun event we throw in July. So, but no, luckily not. We haven't had to cancel yet.
That's good. And I mean, I remember 2015 was a terrible storm. And as another testament to the caliber of volunteers that you have out there is that you continued the race despite the storm, historic storm, but everyone was safe. Everyone was kept.
It was just a little rain.
It was just a little rain, a little freezing temperatures, a little hypothermia, but all the volunteers and everyone just kept everyone calm and safe and efficient. And so you have storms, you have fires, it doesn't matter. You have great crew and great calls. Let's get another question in there, babe.
Yeah, question from Wing. How hard is it to change the permit from one course to another? So did you have to change any permits to do the out and back?
So luckily not. And that's really why the out and back was our only option. That fire a couple years ago prompted the conversation, luckily, of how much can I plan or permit plan B, plan C? Because you can't predict a fire, where it's going to go or where it's going to be. Can we have a south option, a north option? Meaning, our loop is bisected by I-90. So really the out and back was the only option because we didn't have to change our permit. If we had wanted to, everything we used was currently permitted course. And that's what we realized a couple years ago. So that's why it was really out and back or nothing, because you can't change the permit that short a notice. It's just, at least with the Forest Service, it's a lot more complicated. than that. We're on a 5-year permit, luckily, but it's for our particular trails and roads. It would have to go past every office or desk in the ranger district or ranger office again, because to assess all the different areas that we go through, it's more involved than people realize. So not an option. The out and back was what we had.
I mean, it's
answer
also
that
a
too much
good
of a ramble?
course. It's a good course because PCT is becoming harder and harder to permit, from what I've been told and from what I've been learning. It's one of those iconic trails that the permitting process can't be easy. So to be able to run 60 miles of that is like kind of a dream for a lot of people. I imagine those who ran Cascade Crest this weekend, that would not be the case.
A lot of people will say it was not very
I don't know
dreamy.
that the second half was a dream.
Yeah,
it was quite a dream. But yeah, it's a gift to be able to get so much time on the PCT. It's a wonderful trail. So yeah.
Let's get to a couple more questions here. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, a question from Ryan. Is this the only year that Cascade Crest has been rerouted?
Another good question.
No. So one of our special features of the course is going through the Snoqualmie Tunnel. And so it's about 2.3-mile stretch through an old decommissioned railroad tunnel right through the middle of Cascades. So that's what gets us from the west side to the east side of the pass. Thinking 6 or 7, 8-ish years ago, the tunnel was closed for safety reasons, so there was a reroute up over into the ski area, dropping people down to Hyack.
Just staying on the PCT.
So that was for a little while, just for a little bit more, and then where you branch off, where the PCT gets off that service road.
Got it.
So we'd continue on that service road into the back of the ski area and drop down ski trails, which are great to ski, but man, they're rough and steep.
Yeah.
I jokingly called it the easy years just to razz friends, but no, that was a tougher course for sure. That's the only reroute until I added the loop around blowout last year, and so our normal course shifted last year, but that was voluntarily by choice.
Yeah, and I think it's a great addition. I haven't touched it, but it seems cool. Basically, it added 3 miles plus a little bit of climbing and a nice new view.
Oh yeah, yep. I'm a fan, and I think most people are. Once they, I think the added distance sort of got in people's head initially, but all the feedback I got, especially from the veterans, were like, "Oh heck yeah, that was just." It's a pretty sweet section. It gives us a new second highest point, a couple more miles of PCT going right along the ridge along the north side of Blowout Mountain. So it's pretty awesome. So bummed we missed that this year, but
yeah.
Luckily when it came to the scramble of me figuring out the reroute this year, I'm thinking out and back, and mentally I'm like, oh crap, this could be 107 miles. And so I talked to Adam about, and you just got to bring in all your friends and help, because just getting a different perspective. He's like, well, we just get rid of the blowout loop and it's 102. And I was like, well, that just makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think that's where we actually, Adam was a big help with giving you guys 102 miles instead of 107-ish, because I was just locked in at that point with all the other details. So you're welcome to Adam, or I'm sorry, then Adam, your thanks for not making it even longer and tougher than it was.
That's really, really funny.
Was it tough?
Yeah, no. It was easy. Thank you, Adam, for making it easy.
Yeah, totally easy. Easier. How's that?
I want to talk a bit about that course. So this, as someone who loves to study courses and break them down into minute detail, every course I run, I draw it out. I include gain and elevation change and hills and where they start, where they end. I write it all out by hand, and I see all the tiny details. So while I'm running, I can pull it out and take a look at it. With this one, the PCT section up front, heading from Easton towards Hyack, which is the forward direction of the course, is awesome. From what I remember, it's awesome. I've done it now 3 times, not only once in the race, but then there's training runs and other things like that. And it's beautiful because PCT is rolling. It's a net downhill, despite the fact that there's some ups and stuff. You do climb close. I forget what the major gain is up from. I think it's close to 3,000 feet in just a couple of miles up to the top of Goat Peak and then Blowout Mountain. So the front climb of this race is gnarly, but it gets you up there. And so there's this beautiful flowing 50-mile stretch through alpine lakes and real technical in spots, but just beautiful. And it drops you down a rope section and you go through that tunnel. So Rich's course change basically brought you back along that section. So it's net uphill on the second half of the race. And rather than have, you know, 2 big climbs or needles as the regular course does, you're constantly going up and down, which in my mind sounds worse. So there's lots of discussions before this race went down. I was like, I don't think it's going to be easier like people think. I think it's going to be harder. But no, I was going to say, like, a lot of people just didn't know.
I believe you were trying to tell me that it was going to be easier.
Maybe, but that's also like you're going into your first 100.
No,
I want to
it's
make
not.
Yeah, you knew
that was just a pep talk.
It was a pep talk, but you thought you knew it was going to be harder. Rich, you had that mindset.
Well, just on the surface, you know, when the normal course, you leave Hayek, you've got 15 miles of forest road. You're climbing close to 3,000 feet up over Cachillas Ridge, but it's road. We essentially changed out 20 miles of road for trail. So that just by itself is going to slow people down. You're going up the ropes. I mean, that's people seem to enjoy it, but that was a challenge. And what I heard actually is even after the ropes, I mean, the climb all the way, if you look at the profile, we were able to get someone to flip our profile around and give an accurate one for this weekend's course. And the PCT is generally rolling, but the way it laid out, I feel like normally you've got these decent little steep climbs, but then longer descents, whereas now you're doing longer ascents with, steeper descents, drops.
Yeah.
But those longer ascents is what really, I think, wear on the mid to back of the pack. The faster folks, they're running most anything. But the long ascents, they're just a lot more miles. It just really wears on people. And I think we talk a lot about the PCT and the ropes, but east into the PCT is just rough. I think the normal course, people, it's early, they're excited. At the end of the race, they forget how tough that first 15 plus miles was. It's great. It's beautiful trail, but it's rough. I mean, the dirt bikes are on it. It's rutted out. It's dusty. It's steep. PCT is awesome because it's suitable for stock. There's not going to be a grade steeper than whatever that standard is. Right. Whereas non-PCT, I mean, and it becomes a lot more challenging. And so that first 15 miles became our last 15 miles, and I really think that ate people up and made it a lot more challenging. So really, the exchange of 20 miles of road to trail and then finishing with that 15, I think really, I knew it was going to be tougher. I just was waiting to hear that from runners and especially from vets to get their take on it once they were done.
I know from my running of it, I forgot the front 25 miles because I was so, like, in my mind, I think back to the race and I think about those last 50 because that's where all of the drama happened. Right. So I remember the needles. I remember Thorpe. I remember the storm. I remember Cachillas Ridge. But I barely remember the climb up to Goat Peak. But I know now, and
I feel like I will never forget the climb up to Goat Peak. So the 15 miles that Rich was just talking about at the beginning of the course, those were some of the hardest miles that I've ever experienced. You're talking about it being like powdery and dusty, and it's just a grind. And you're talking about the trails being rutted out. There's some spots where you really had to kind of wedge your feet in or try and go up on the edges.
Well, you're climbing up, and the trail beside the trail is essentially like what, waist or upper torso high. I mean, it's rutted.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it's worse so than normal this year. That's one spot I did make it out to pre-race, which is odd for me, but I've had my scouts, so I knew it was gonna be a harder course, just not sure as far as how much. So I'll take a closer look to see guys that have finished it a bunch of times, how it compared their times, but we don't want to psych people out too much.
You want to go ahead.
Oh, you want them to be prepared, but not totally psyched out. Because we also, because of the short notice, one of the unfortunate things was I wasn't going to flex on the overall cutoff because we're already, our overall cutoff is 7 p.m. and we're already pushing, once we get all cleaned up, it's almost dark. So the margin of error for safety, getting our sweepers out, getting our volunteers out before dark, we have a lost or injured runner. I wasn't going to push that, so changing time frames wasn't as much of an option to me, which is unfortunate. We had some cuts and more than we normally would. So that was, not a fun aspect of the change this year, but unfortunately that's what had to happen.
And I definitely want to start talking about your race, Kim. Before we get to that, of course, I have to commend the winners of the Cascade Crest 100 because despite the course change, despite the high temperatures, the smoke, the course out and back, the ropes twice and all that stuff, the leaders, both sides, all came in with smiles, and they were incredibly cordial the entire day at all the aid stations. It was really awesome to see the community come and rally around them. Lindsay Hamoudi, I think I'm pronouncing that last name right. I've met him at Hurt, but I forget how to pronounce his last name, but I believe it's Hamoudi, Rich?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah. That's how I pronounce it.
Super nice guy.
Incredibly nice guy, super fast, super humble. He crushed it out there, and I believe it was just over 20 hours. I don't know if there was anyone that was under 20 hours this year. That's testament to the toughness of the course too. Normally there's a handful of people that were usually like one or two can go under, but this year is just over 20 hours. Lindsay just crushed it. And our guest from last week, Caitlin Gerben, crushed for the ladies, just absolutely decimated. And we have her Strava pulled up just to kind of give us some perspective.
So based on Caitlin's Strava, she has elevation gain 25,639 feet.
Which is bonkers. Nice job, Rich. We tried to do the math. We tried to do the math beforehand, but I don't think any of us were close.
Yeah.
That's on the high end. I mean, it's really right. That's one data point, but I've been seeing anything from 19 to 26. So I really think it's just our GPS are only so accurate. Hopefully, it's almost a moot point now. It's just curiosity, but I'm thinking somewhere right around 24-ish, give or take a little bit.
It's amazing. The fact, in my mind, like the fact that runners were still even able to do what they did with those conditions is bonkers to me. And they all did it with a smile, and it was awesome. So congratulations, Lindsay and Caitlin. Great to see them pull away the victory at Cascade Crest. I want to go ahead.
Oh, there was a question in the chat room from Nathaniel before we move from Rich here. Nathaniel asked, question for Rich. How do you handle folks who narrowly miss aid station cutoffs? Must be a harrowing experience.
I'm still dealing with that a little bit. No, it's unfortunate, but it's a part of the sport. We have cutoffs, and some people are pretty upset. I think normally I'm a lot softer with. Gotta be careful how I put this. The course change made it a lot firmer this year. Mm-hmm. I had a cutoff at the last aid station, and we flexed it close to a half hour, just to let people through it. But it was sort of a moving target a little bit because one, I wanted to push people along, but I didn't know how long it was going to take people, especially the back of the pack. So as we got to I think it was within an hour or so, I was able to look at people's splits up to that point from going from go down to the finish, as well as, closer to, I'd say 28 to 30 hour finish. So knowing when they were how long it was actually going to take was really helpful. Initially it was supposed to be 5:30 and it pushed actually closer to 6 when that cutoff was, and people they weren't going to make it.
Yeah.
And so it is really difficult call to make. That's probably the event went great. The weekend went great. That's probably the biggest thing that I still am, not the happiest about having to do, because, you can look at our results. I mean, people always finish after cutoff, and, my perspective on it is cutoff should be out on the course. If you make it into the finish, then, you're going to get a buckle, you're going to get a finish. So we do have people finishing after our overall cutoff. But unfortunately, it was a lot tighter up there, and tough calls had to be made. So, but we have grade 8 station folks, and they were put in the really difficult situation of having to relay that information and deal with some not super happy folks. But it's part of the sport. So
everyone was very professional, and I can't imagine that's got to be one of the hardest parts of the job is because the runners have worked so hard in training to get to the event and so hard at the event and dealing with adverse conditions, and they just work their ass off. And I can imagine having to make the cutoffs, especially towards the latter miles, is like extremely difficult. I want to start.
And these were friends. I mean, that's the hard part these are friends of mine that got cut off, and I would love to have seen them finish, but we've got to close the course. We've got to be respectful of all the volunteers and the fire department, give them their station back. And we're already pushing with a 7 p.m. Final cutoff. So it makes it a lot more firm at that point, or easy to make that call. But again, it's not something I really feel great about still, because these aren't strangers. These are friends that didn't make that cut. So
one of the first things that Rich said to me when I talked to him earlier today, just to confirm that he could come on today for the show, because I knew I was taking him away from what he needed, which was like sleep, was that these are his friends, and that that was the hardest part, was having to make those cutoffs what they were, purely because it's a safety thing and all that sort of thing. So that's just a testament to Rich as a human being. I want to start talking about Kim's race. Obviously, it's something that we've been talking about here on the show leading up to the event, and Kim's been training her ass off all year despite injury and ankle sprain and all that stuff. Because I've run it in the past, I was really excited to be able to share the experience with Kim, and I could finally be like, hey, remember that view from that one point? And Kim would be like, I remember.
I have almost seen 100% of the actual course now at this point. So
the one part that you had never seen was that front section.
And the needles.
And the needles, which we'll save for another year. But the front section, to put it in perspective, the first 30 miles of this course it's an extremely tough 50K. It's about 10,000 feet of gain. I think it's a little bit over 10,000 feet of gain in the first 50K. When I ran in 2015, I predicted that I would arrive at mile 30-ish. What I didn't know at the time was that it would be it was Masters course record pace. Adam Huey owns that course record. I didn't realize that my prediction was it was a course record. So I had to adjust my time, and I'm glad I did, because that front 30K or 30 miles is bonkers. So this race has 3 things, and Rich, you can absolutely attest to this. It starts late, so it's a 9 a.m. start. It's later than most hundreds would start, which I think is kind of cool, but it adds a bit of challenge to it. Because it starts late, it also starts hot. So if it's a hot year, the heat's already started. You're instantly in the heat, and it starts hard because you have a 3,000 to 4,000 foot climb right out of Easton. So those 3 factors definitely played a part in your experience, I'd say, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you feel going into it?
I mean, going into it, I've been like pretty open with a lot of you guys who follow me. I had a pretty bad ankle sprain at the beginning of June that kind of derailed some of my training, and got into my head a little bit about being ready and missing a few weeks here and there. It's not ideal, but I feel like a lot of training cycles aren't ideal, and they're not perfect, and you just kind of have to trudge on. So going into the race, obviously 100 miles is a huge feat to take on. I felt like I was pretty calm for the weeks leading up until the very last week.
Way calmer than I was in 2015. I was a mess. You were not.
I had everything planned. I had my pacers and I had my fancy spreadsheet. And then, as Rich mentioned, the course change happened, and that sent me into a bit of a panic, I think. Obviously, I understand why. I mean, my parents live in the epicenter of where the massive wildfire in BC is, so I totally get it and I totally respect it. But it does kind of, when you have this big plan laid out, it does kind of make you go, oh, okay, well, I need to now kind of readjust things and take a step back. And so that's what I did. So I had my plan B laid out, day of, I actually felt pretty okay at the start line. I was ready. And
people commented that they would come up to me and go, man, Kim's really calm. And I go, I know. I remember hiding in a porta potty having a panic attack. I mean, Rich, I think, was like, hey, what's up, Ethan? I was like, I gotta go. And I remember going to the porta potty. You were like, just focused.
I felt like I was kind of mentally ready to just get going, you know. And I think you can remember that feeling of just being like, I just need to get out of here. I just need to go, right?
Yep, just get started, get the feet moving. Yep. How was that first climb for you?
So
you had never seen it before.
I'd never seen the climb other than the elevation profile and your video, of course.
Which features that rickety bridge, Rich, by the way. You mentioned the Rich in the pre-race briefing. That rickety bridge is still there. I don't know how it survived.
Don't take the bridge. I almost said after Wendy mentioned it, don't take the bridge. Just get your feet wet.
I think like 90% of people that were in my vision around that area took the bridge.
I remember taking the bridge going, I shouldn't take the bridge.
I also thought that as I was taking the bridge, and as I was taking the bridge, one guy was going through the water. I'm like, what am I doing?
Go watch Amongst the Evergreen. Literally only for like a couple minutes up front. I filmed the bridge because the bridge was like, is this how the course is? Like, is it all crazy bridge crossings? There is one later on in the Trail from Hell that I don't know if I think I also filmed it, but yeah, bridges along the course are not ideal.
Yeah, so that first climb, it's a tough climb. Like it's a tough climb. And for me, another thing I've talked to you guys before about is race anxiety, because I am a slower runner. You get into the start of the race and you have everybody kind of blowing out of the gate, like blowing by you. And even this is one of the things I was a little bit surprised by, was how fast people were actually taking the first couple miles of this race.
I remember this too. Yeah.
And I was kind of like, oh, am I like being like too conservative? And, you know, I've been hearing from people like you, people like Gary, Linda, like all these very wise people around me, like, do not take it out too fast. You will ruin yourself for later. So I was kind of doing my own thing and, you know, watching everybody kind of take off. But that first climb was extremely difficult, but I felt pretty decent until I got to the top. And that's kind of where things started going a little bit sideways for me very early on.
Your concerns leading up to the race revolved around one thing, and that was running in the dark. And that changed. It shifted.
Right.
So your big concern, because we've run in the dark before, but you, for some reason, this was like the thing you needed to focus on. I had my specific things when I ran, but yours was running in the dark and being chased by creatures, which in my mind I'm going, that's ridiculous. It's the PCT. There's going to be 160 people on the PCT. There's no way a mountain lion or a bear would want anything to do with you. Even if you're last place, you're not, because the sweepers are going to come behind you.
But I had like raw steaks hanging off my back.
I was like, there's no way. But I understand that when you were racing, especially at first 100, you're going to have something that you're going to latch onto. With the change, that actually that shifted your worry, because the runners would be coming back towards you during the night.
Yeah. So with the change with the out and back, I was like, this is great. There's going to be people. There will already be people, you know, coming towards me. So there's more feet on the trail, more headlamps out there. But with the change also came some adjustments in the time cutoffs that I totally understand why they're in place, and they're back to the cutoffs that they would have been
normal year,
but for me, and I think a lot of you guys who follow me know that I am obsessive about time cutoffs. So that little time change and seeing that time change became my new focus of worry.
So when you got to the top of Goat Peak, what started to happen?
So I climbed pretty hard on the way, like pretty well on the way up, or I thought I was climbing pretty well. And I got up the top and I was just like slammed with a massive wave of nausea. So that is kind of where my stomach started going sideways. And that's not really where you want your stomach to start going sideways in a 100-mile race. Not near
mile, what? Like 9? 8?
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe closer to mile 8. And shortly after that is when I started throwing up. And I just couldn't. I was trying I was trying to remedy the problem. You know, when you're in an ultra and you're having these problems happen whatever your problem is, you need to adapt. You need to kind of problem solve on the go. So I had different food options. I had different liquid options, and everything was just, I couldn't keep anything in. I couldn't keep any of my nutrition in. I couldn't keep any fluids in, not even sips of water. I'd get to the aid station, I'd try something salty or savory, and that wasn't working for me either. And it was not good.
I got a text from Kim. I was driving up to Tacoma Pass aid station, which
is how bad things were.
early 20s, like 22 or 23. Rich, correct me if I'm wrong. Tacoma Pass is a great aid station. It's the first one your crew can be at. And I remember getting that text from Kim and going, the text was, "I'm not feeling great, having a rough day." In my mind, I was like,
yeah, I'm not feeling great, having a rough day, but I'm fighting or something.
Fighting, like yeah. And so that gave me like a little bit of optimism, despite the fact that I knew that anxiety would play a role at some point in the race. We both deal with it on a regular basis, but it's just a matter of something you got to get over in the moment, mind over matter. But when I didn't know what rough meant because you didn't specify.
Right.
So when you came into Tacoma Pass, it was almost right on your goal, which was to get to Stampede Pass before cutoff. So you weren't far off of your goal. But the aid station manager, Eric Sash, who's run the race a number of times, he's been manning that aid station for a long time. He's like, you got to get her in and out pretty quick. He didn't have a cutoff there, but he knew that for her to have a chance, she'd have to come in and turn around and like get out. One thing I have to say that as like testament to your like desire to continue on, when Kim came into the aid station, rough.
I'm saying like, and I'm.
You just posted a photo of it too, by the way.
I mentioned like I was suffering from like mile 8 or 9. It didn't stop. This was like a non-stop
headache
event. Yeah.
She rolled into the aid station and instantly handed me the bottles, the wrappers that she'd given up. She took the new stuff, her drop bag, like the new food and everything. Yeah. So that to me signaled, oh, she's not done. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, she's either gonna come in and go, I'm done, and we have to convince her to move on, or she's gonna come in and be like, I'm in rough shape, but I got to keep going. And that's exactly what happened. She's giving us the stuff to refill. The aid station volunteers like grabbed it, refilled it, popped everything in. You basically sat down for a couple seconds, got some tears out, let that stuff come over.
Linda said I was allowed to cry.
Yeah, everyone's like, you're allowed to cry, but we're refilling bottles and stuff like that. But you got up out of that chair and you continued on.
Yeah, and I have to say huge thank you to, all the volunteers at every aid station that I encountered in the miles that I was able to do were some of the very best aid station people that I've ever come across.
They're pros.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a question here in the chat room, since it relates to exactly what we just talked about. Question from Mile Long Legs. I saw you being iced down. Did you get overheated?
Yes, and that's the first thing Gary said when he saw me roll in.
And that's what I think. That's 100% what I think happened. You did not roll in sweaty. You rolled in dry.
With a throbbing headache. Throwing up.
And throwing up. To me, that's heat stroke. Because Rich, do you know the temperatures on Saturday? I know Sunday was even hotter, but do you remember the temperatures from Saturday?
I can tell you what was forecasted, but I don't have a read on. At least in Easton, it was supposed to be mid 80s.
Yeah.
Or 85 on Saturday, but up to 94 or so on Sunday. So it's a tough way to start, and like we all know, you get too hot or dehydrated, it's something tough to correct.
It's one of those things where we've now talked a lot about in the last 48 hours. In any 100, if you get overcome by the food thing, or you're throwing up, or nothing sounds good, if it's later or even like middle of a race, if you've managed to bank a little bit of time, you usually have a lot of time to be able to kind of resolve the issue. But if you're already kind of mid or back of the pack, it's really tough to come back from something like that, especially so early on, because you really have to rally quickly in order to get just back on track, in order to start making up time. So I felt terrible having to push you out of the aid station, because in my mind I'm like, just let her sit, let her cool down.
But you guys basically packed me in ice.
Yeah. Poured ice on you, put it in your pack.
Pack full of ice, neck full. My hat was full of ice, and so I left behind, I think, 2 other people. And when I left that aid station, I had like a very split second of, things are turning around for me. I can do this. I can get there. And I was feeling good. And I felt like you're kind of climb when you leave that aid station. And I was kind of hiking with another girl at a point, and she's like, no, you need to go. You're moving much better than me. So I passed her, and I could see a guy way ahead of me, and I was kind of trudging along, and I passed him, and I was like, this, like, things are going to turn around.
Making up time, yeah.
And then, boom.
Happened again.
Throwing up on the side of the trail again.
So there was a 10-mile stretch between Tacoma Pass and Stampede Pass. There's one aid station in the middle there. When like, did you ever have doubt that you would be able to make it to Stampede Pass, or was there ever a point that you were like, it's over, or what happened in that?
Yeah,
I
knew before I was getting close to, what's that, Snowshoe Butte.
Mm-hmm.
I knew when I was getting close to there that I wasn't moving fast enough. So I basically rolled into Snowshoe Butte and like said to them, like, what do I do? Because I'm pretty sure I'm not gonna, like, I can't rally hard enough. I would have to have run like, I think like 8-minute miles or something.
Yeah.
I would have to run pretty fast. I couldn't move fast. And they're like, oh, I think the sweeps will be coming soon. And I actually thought it was the other two runners that I had passed that were, I could hear their footsteps, and it was the sweeps. So
the sweepers.
Yeah. So I hung out there, tried to have some food, wait for them, and kind of jogged in the rest of the miles with them. And Yuli.
And by the way, Uli Steidl was at Stampede Pass with myself and Justin, Destiny, and Gary, and Linda, and Trisha. We all were there waiting for Kim to arrive, thinking that she'd come in just under cutoffs, and we had like our plan of like pushing her out just in time to get to Hayak in time. Uli Steidl, who's a local legend and basically very fast guy, has like FKTs and all sorts of stuff. Just a legend. Volunteered to just go make sure everyone was safe. So he was going to run back on the trail just to make sure everyone was okay. And by the time he left, it was pretty much cut off.
Mm-hmm.
I asked Charlie, one of the co-aid station captains, also the former race director. Am I right, Rich? It was Charlie at Stampede Pass.
Yeah, Charlie was at Stampede. And we ended up flexing that cut off a bit.
He was incredibly kind. He's like, do you want to go just check on her too? And I was like, that would be great. So he allowed me to go run and just find you. And I remember coming across you, the sweepers, and Uli, and thinking,
I was like, this is just me and my posse of men.
It was a full-on party, but you definitely looked pretty rough.
Yeah, I mean, and you were with me for a little while. My head was throbbing so bad that I just had to keep stopping because the throbbing head would trigger me throwing up, and it was just this vicious, cycle that just didn't ever seem to remedy itself.
So unfortunately, you didn't make the time cutoffs at Stampede.
Right.
Was it hard coming in knowing that, or was it? Yeah.
I mean, this is like, you put things into perspective. So I talked to David Roach, who we had on the show a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
He phoned me actually the day before the race, and we were talking about it, and I was expressing my concern of DNFing and feeling like it's this huge thing, because it's not like, when you're in the race, it doesn't feel like just the race. It's the race. It's all the time that you take to train for the race. It's turning down social things with your friends because you need to do a long run. It's for this particular race, I needed to run like a qualifying 50-mile race prior. So
right.
it's all the work you put into that. So you make it into this big heavy thing and put all this pressure onto yourself. And David had a great point, and I've told you this, is that he said, what I do is I put all my, I'm not quoting him, but this is sort of
it's a
rough quote of what he said.
David won't mind.
He essentially said, what I do is I put all my athletes on their deathbed. And when you're in that moment, does that DNF really matter in the grand scheme of things? And of course it doesn't. Of course, you can rationalize that. Of course it doesn't. But at the moment and right now, as I'm almost in tears, it feels bad.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Would you attempt this race again? Would you run it again?
Yes, but only if it's like a harder out and back.
Yeah, Rich, can you, if you don't mind, can you make it a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, no problem. Make it happen. We're just gonna add a few up and out and backs up Thorpe.
Oh god. Oh. Yeah. Have to collect like 5 chips from the top of Thorpe. That'd be terrible. As a spouse to you, it was incredible to watch your journey over the last year, overcoming, for many of you know this, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but both Kim and I deal with just anxiety, day-to-day stuff, and it's definitely like within races and all sorts of things. And one thing that is also, it's a bittersweet curse, is that because we have social media following, we do Ginger Runner Live, and we do love this sport so much, but we are present definitely in it. It's definitely hard to swallow these types of things because it's public, and a lot of people can kind of anonymously DNF. In this case, it's definitely public, and I know that was a huge concern of yours, was letting people down.
Right? Do I make it public? Do I even talk about it? Do I, how do I tell people that I failed at this?
I have to thank every single person who either follows us, watches us, is a Patreon supporter, or is just a regular viewer, or maybe someone who chimes in every once in a while. The unanimous support that has come as a result of this is just, it's amazing, and it's a testament to the community that we've built here, because it doesn't matter what Kim and I do, people still understand that every day is different, and we might have a good day, we might have a bad day. I'm incredibly proud of you, because towing the start line of a 100-miler is hard.
Right.
Towing the start line of Cascade Crest is harder.
But even finding the courage for anybody to tow the start line of whatever their goal race is.
Any goal,
really, that, it's hard. It's hard to do. And regardless of how bad you want it and how well you've trained,
And I want to clarify, you will never do this, but I want to clarify that Kim never gave up. It was never Kim coming in and giving up. It was simply a matter of timing out. That's it.
Right.
And I want you to know that too, that it was not you giving up. And that's what's incredible. You would roll into the aid stations, giving us your bottles and your food to replace. That's the first thing that you did, as opposed to sit down and want to give up. We have a lot of friends that ran this weekend that did incredible things out there. Many got buckles, some did not. And it's fine. It's okay. And I mean, it's incredibly difficult to see friends not accomplish, and it's really hard to see your spouse not accomplish a goal. Are you going to run another 100?
Yes. I mean, this has been like a year, years of thinking and dreaming and planning. So yeah, it's still right there.
Yeah.
It all, I'm sitting here crying, it's so weird, because you think it's just a race, but then you also have all these emotions, and it also just happens.
It's fresh.
I feel like I'm pretty,
We had a conversation of should we even talk about this on Monday? Because it's still fresh. It's still fresh. Like, Kim was able to take in food yesterday. That's kind of the first time you're even able to take in calories.
Just to get a little personal with you guys and let you know how dehydrated exactly I was.
Rich wants to know. Rich has actually been waiting for this bit of detail.
I didn't pee for almost 30 hours. Peed before the race in the morning at our house. And then I, no matter how much I was drinking that night after I dropped and stuff, that's how bad it was.
So it was obviously heat-related issues and all sorts of factors like that compounded, and you weren't able to get back from it. It's understandable. No one would ever hold you accountable for the DNF or any of that kind of stuff. It's a learning experience, and a lot of people obviously in the chat room are talking about how DNFs are better learning experiences than actual victories and that sort of thing. I agree. We've done now 178 episodes of Ginger Runner Live, and there isn't a single guest on the show that would ever say a DNF is the worst thing that's ever happened to them, because if anything, it's just made them a stronger person, a stronger runner, all that sort of thing.
We actually have you seen in our house right now, and he's actually just talked about
his.
Yep.
Rich, have you ever DNF'd a race, or have you ever had bad experiences?
I've definitely DNF'd races. Bad experience is relative. It's all experience that we learn from.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't think of DNFs as a failure at all. It's a blanket statement, and maybe not completely true, but I feel like if you haven't DNF'd, you're probably fairly new to the sport. And that might be bit of a generalization, but there's some truth there. Or maybe not pushing yourself quite as far. I mean, that's part of these challenges is pushing the edge, and sometimes you flare out, and sometimes stuff happens. I mean,
yep.
Some stuff's under our control and some's not, and that's what's really fun about this sport. It's not about not all physical. Sometimes it's mental, it's emotional. There's logistics, there's chafing, there's nutrition, hydration, weather. There's stuff we control, stuff we can't. So it's all just an experience, and so it makes it so much fun.
Something that's unique about Cascade is every year you have runners who have either run it 10 times and they're going, or 9 times they're going for their 10th, or have completed 10 hundreds before, and this is their 11th, or you also have first timers. Is there any advice? Because we have a lot of viewers here who maybe are thinking about their first time.
There was a question from Todd in the chat room earlier that says, "Hey Rich, wanting to do your race hopefully in a few years doing my first 100 next March. What would you say is the most important to train for your crazy awesome race?"
The most important thing to train for it?
Yeah, for your crazy awesome race.
That attitude is probably, he's got it. I mean, just embrace the challenge and get yourself ready. Is I personally like just a bunch of long adventure runs, being really comfortable to be out on your own, out in the mountains for a long time. I mean, this is your passion. The races are just going to be easier when you've got support out there. If, on the weekends, you're going out for 10, 15, 20 hours, just having fun with your friends, dipping into creeks. You start showing up to races and you've got aid stations. It's just going to make it seem like a lot more fun, easy, and a party, because you are. It's sort of what I like to look at Cascade as is, we're one of the best parties out there. We're throwing a party. We've got, 16 or 18 of them out there in the woods. So, but I think that attitude of, what do I need to get ready? Just being eager and ready and being excited about it is probably the most important thing. It's all attitude, mostly attitude.
And you had first-time finishers finish this year, yeah?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Many, and that's what I also think is great. Is despite the challenges and despite the changes and all that stuff, you still have first-timers get out there and get it done, and it's just testament to the fact that no matter how hard the race is, you can always get it done, and it's a really cool thing. I can't wait to pace and crew you at your next one.
Oh, you're not. You won't be part of my. Sorry.
Cool. We're gonna end the show here. No.
I do want to say I see that she is in the chat room. I do want to say a special hello to Taryn in the chat room. I ran with Taryn a little bit at Sun Mountain 50 miler, which was my first 50 miler a couple years ago now, and Taryn was actually one of the people that left Tacoma aid station.
She waited for you at Tacoma, like, let's go, Kim, let's go.
And she was very encouraging and very supportive.
It was really cool. And her mom was one of my favorite parts. I actually have it on film. The angle's probably all messed up, but
no, that part's actually good.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Oh, I wish I had pulled it aside for tonight's show. Maybe I'll edit it into something, or maybe next week's show. But Taryn's mom grabbed Kim by the face, by the jowls,
as I was sitting there being like iced and
like crying and iced and like, I don't know if I can do this and everything. And her mom is just like, I'm a nurse. I've seen this before.
Because my hand is bleeding, and I was like, I don't want to get my blood on you.
She's like, it's okay. You're gonna be fine. Your power, like, it was this incredibly powerful moment between two incredibly strong women, and it was just like, oh, this is amazing. And Kim stood up out of the chair, and you left, and it was like, oh, that was rad. It was really, really cool. We're gonna wrap up the show because we're going a little bit long on time. Totally understandable. Tired. Rich is exhausted, so we're gonna do a quick post show with him. If you have residual questions about Cascade Crest, let's jump into the post show and ask Rich those questions while we still have him. So if you are unfamiliar with how the post show works, basically we do a nice rapid fire question with him based off of those who are viewing for the Patreon crew. And if you would like to join the Patreon crew, just go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner. It literally is. It's either $1 a month. You can jump up to different tiers if you want to, but that $1 a month, which is like a fraction of a cup of coffee, gets you access to all of the post shows, previous and future, and live. So it basically supports the channel, keeps everything alive here, helps us do what we do week after week. And so we'd love to have you, and I'm sure Rich would love to get some of these questions answered in the post show, which we're going to do here in just a couple of minutes. Last note, before I get into the thank yous and stuff for the show. this is something that's been happening more and more as Kim and I put ourselves out there and stuff like that. I learned my lesson a little bit after or before Cascade Crest and then after Cascade Crest regarding our Strava and what we put out there on Strava and keeping it public and stuff like that. I just want to say that if you're going to criticize someone for how they performed in a race based off of their Strava information, you obviously don't know what you're doing, and you don't understand that there are a lot of factors that are involved in training for a race. It doesn't matter what the distance of the race is, but a Strava is not going to tell you everything that's involved.
I've had 2 very interesting messages from middle-aged men that do not know me, advising me that it was suicidal for me to even try to start Cascade, and what was the one today? Oh, that maybe I should try out 5K and 10K turkey trots instead.
In an effort to keep this community positive and supportive, and I'm not saying anyone, I know one of them is a frequent supporter of Ginger Runner, so I'm not going to name names or any of that kind of stuff. It's just one of those things I'm like, think about that. Think about what you're doing before you do it, especially if someone has just DNF'd or any of that kind of stuff. The members of this community are incredible human beings. You don't know where they are in their journey, and a Strava is certainly not going to tell you where they are in their journey. So I encourage you to take a step back before you judge someone else, and look in the mirror and just make sure that everything is aligning for yourself before you try to figure someone else out. I just wanted to say that publicly and out there because it drives me crazy, and it has for years, because it's stuff that we don't talk about on the backside of this whole thing.
And it's part of us putting ourselves out there as mid.
It's also one of the reasons why I stopped posting a lot of stuff on Strava, purely because of this. I encourage you guys, our community, again, 99.999,000% incredible and positive. The only reason I said that is because there's 1 or 2 bad seeds that every once in a while it's like, come on. So I'm obviously preaching to no one out here currently watching live. Okay, so that's it for the main show. Thank you, Brian Sands, for continuing to support us on Patreon at the top tier level, helping the Ginger Runner live episodes happen week after week. So we want to make sure that we shout him out. Training for his very first marathon coming up on October 8th. He'll be running 26.2 miles at the Chicago Marathon for the very first time ever, which is really cool. It's fun to follow his story. He recently had his longest run ever and nailed it, 24 miles. It's a really awesome story. Over the course of his journey, he's lost 100 pounds, and he's like continuing on. Really supportive of the show, been a frequent viewer. He's in the chat room tonight. Of course, we have to thank him. And thank you all of our top tier Patreon supporters for continuing to help keep this whole thing alive. It's fantastic. Patreon supporters, we'll see you in just a couple seconds in the post show. If you're not, consider joining. And am I forgetting anything?
I think that's it. I do want to say thank you, Rich.
Yes, Rich.
RD from Cascade Crest.
Yeah. Such a powerful weekend, man.
Your amazing team, Rachel and Kelly and everybody else that is out there. And thank you to all
Wendy, volunteers
at Cascade Crest. Really some of the most amazing people in this community.
Thank you, Rich. You have been nothing but incredibly supportive. While we were living in Los Angeles, you would reach out and give us your support. And even here locally, it's just awesome to be so close to your race and to your people, to your crew. Thank you for putting on such a stellar weekend, dude.
If I can, just a huge shout out to the whole team. I mean,
yeah, please.
I'm the director, but it's a huge team effort, and I'll take way too long if I list them all, but just know that I'm just the pretty face, or the not so pretty face. How's that? It's such a huge team effort, and it's really fun and gratifying to see it all come together. But just thank you to everybody that makes it look easy, because it's not as easy as it looks, but man, they sure make it look easy from the outside. So hope everyone had a good weekend, and hope to see you next year in Easton. So.
Can't wait to hashtag see you in Easton. I'm stealing it from States because I think it's like my heart really wants Cascade Crest to be this big thing, but also my heart also says keep it small, keep it local, and keep it family. I feel like anyone who attempts this race, finishes this race, or even gets 32 miles of this race in is part of this incredible family, because I felt welcomed with open arms, and everyone. It's just an incredible community, Rich. You've really taken on a community that's already incredible and just helped bring it even more so. So thank you.
Thank you.
And any advice for anyone who wants to get into Cascade? I know it's a lottery. When does registration open? I'm sure you're not wanting to talk about that right now.
Registration is it opens January 1st and goes roughly 5-ish weeks. The 8th or 10th or something of February, we have a open period for the lottery, and then I usually do the lottery about a week later. We'll have that and come volunteer. I mean, that's how you earn extra tickets. So come volunteer at the race. And we also we've got the North 350 Blades chapter of the PCTA. They do an incredible amount of work on the trail, and we count service time with them on the trail as volunteer credit towards the event as well. So go spend some time with them and increase your chances to see us next year, because we'd love to have you.
We both course marked last year, and it gives you that extra boost in the lottery. I encourage you guys to volunteer. Just even marking the course, you get to see some of these beautiful sections.
And yeah, I didn't talk about that, you guys. Like, the course is beautiful.
Yeah, even despite the smoke this year, which happened pretty early on, but it blew out pretty quickly. But it's just beautiful. So look into this race if you haven't already. Consider it if you're considering a 100-miler, or if you've already run hundreds and you're looking for a good one. This is it. I promise you. That's it for tonight's show. What did I forget?
One more important message.
Yes.
Linda Barton in the chat room says, "Please tell Rich I love you too."
Oh, Linda Barton says, "I love you, Rich." And of course, a shout out to also Ginger Runner viewers.
Love you too.
I'm hoping that's to Linda.
I think it's to you.
Okay.
I think
that was to you, Ethan, and Linda.
Nice. Love it. We have Ginger Runner viewers that ran the race. Congratulations to them if they finished. If not, they get it next time.
There was Patreon crew out there volunteering as well.
Darren, big shout out to you, man.
Speaking of Linda, I do need to thank Linda, Gary, Reed, you, Justin, and Destiny for showing up for me, regardless of how my day turned out.
And all the others of other crews that jumped into ours to help and all that sort of stuff. It's a really great community. Okay, we're going to see you in the post show, because I could talk and talk and talk. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next Monday. Ian Sharman will be joining us. Maybe a couple guests from UTMB, because UTMB is happening this weekend. Oh my God, the race of the century. Should be interesting to follow. The rain is coming.
It's coming.
It'll certainly be interesting. But we'll talk about that next week. We'll see you guys in the post show if you're Patreon support. That's it. Get out there, train hard, race harder, fight of the hardest. We'll see you guys next week. Bye. Ginger Runner.